Are you scared?
A little bit.
I'm in a bit of a rush. I've actually got a bit of a fish rescue system going on here, a rehoming. I've got a local aquarist who's actually doing a bit of a rescue for a large monster fish, and he's know I can actually get a good size home for it, so he's going to bring it around. I've got this IBC made up for it. I'm draining some water from my turtle tank, and you saw me actually taking some of these sponge filters out of the sump from the turtle tank, and I'm just hooking them up to my Halia air pump and actually getting them ready for the filtration for this monster fish. So the great thing about having some biological filtration already set up inside your filtration beaker, hang on the back, a canister filter, in my case a sump, is that media, in the case of these sponges here, that media is ready to roll just in case you have to isolate a fish. You've got a sick fish, or you might have a rehoming such as this, and you've got that media, you can pull it out, hook it up to some form of filtration, and you don't have to go through that bad cycling stage, which takes, you know, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I'm here with Pike, who is actually a local aquarium enthusiast, and he's got me a little surprise down in these styrofoam boxes, a little bit of a fish rescue.
Yep.
What's the backstory, Pike?
So we've got one bass and one little Tandoris. So they both came out of the same tank in with a Saratoga here. They're all out of a 6-foot tank that I would say could barely hold the fish in it in the first place. The Toga itself could barely turn around, and your bass and eeltail were, you know, cowering down the corner because they've got this massive predator above them. Adam, I know, has, you know, experience with these giant fish tanks. The biggest thing for me was getting these guys to a home where they were going to be happy, and long term they were going to be able to live out their lives. You know, Toga in general get to upwards of probably 45, 60 centimetres, so you've got a 60 centimetre fish in a 40 centimetre tank they can barely turn around in. Creates a bit of a problem, so I thought, Adam, you know, out of all the people I know, he's going to be the one that can build a tank that's going to house this fish for the rest of its life. Yeah,
and that's one of the biggest pet peeves, I think, I was saying before, of mine, is that monster fish in general, if you're prepared to keep a large fish or a number of large fish for its entire life, then by all means go for it. Yep. But I hate to see stingrays and arowanas and flagtails, and in America, arapaimas, and
the Murray cod in Australia, barramundi,
It just goes on and on and on, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
And how many times do we see them re-advertised on Facebook, up for sale, up for swaps, new home required, because people get them in little sizes and aren't prepared. Aren't prepared for the long run. By the way, Pike actually used to work at the we won't name, but the local pet store in Coffs Harbour. Pike has also done a zoological...
So I've got my Cert 3 and a Cert 2 in animal studies and, exhibited wildlife and standards and stuff like that. So I'm a qualified zookeeper.
Yep.
I've also worked at the wildlife sanctuary here in Coffs, so yeah, with their sea turtles and fish. Public and exhibition standards are my biggest one, you know, being able to house a fish long term, understanding the needs of a fish long term. Yep.
So why do you think these sort of fish should actually be in... No. Pet stores at all?
No, I reckon, look, your Murray cod, your mangrove jack, your barramundi, any of these fish that just get to a size where you're not going to be able to realistically keep it in your home aquarium. Yeah. Like, Adam, you're lucky enough to have, you know, the setup here, we've got these giant tanks and, you know, the ability to build them. Most people, you know, a 6 foot's probably the biggest your floor's going to be able to hold, and you want to go buy a barramundi 6 months and you're going to be out of a home for that fish. Like, so I reckon a lot of these fish, they just shouldn't be in the aquarium hobby to begin with.
Or maybe do you think that they should be by order in only?
Yeah, even that'd be a good,
so that it minimises the impulse buy.
Yeah, at the store in Coffs, I'd be, you know, standing there in front of the native tank, and people would come in, I want a native fish, you know, we'd look at the bass, we'd look at this, and they end up going home with a Murray cod. And once they saw the Murray cod, there was no breaking that, because they wanted, you know, this big aggressive fish that's the largest freshwater fish in Australia.
That actually doesn't do anything.
Yeah, that doesn't do anything. sits in a tank for, you know, for the entirety of its life and stares at you.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's the biggest one, you know. People come in and they see these fish, and most of these juvenile predators are pretty when they're young, you know. Mangrove jack are bright red, they've got some blue in them and stuff like that. Like, they are pretty fish, and as soon as they get older, big grey blob, you know, that does nothing, and the fish cops it in the end, you know.
Apparently the water was pretty filthy.
Yeah, so the water these guys came out of, you know, we could barely see the fish through the glass in the water, which is saying something when it's a 2 foot fish in a 2 foot wide tank. So the water itself isn't the best quality, so you probably want to get him out and get him acclimating pretty fast.
I'm going to let this siphon go down into the styrofoam, let it overflow, and just let it keep on running. You're in charge of the lid.
All right, here we go.
Are you scared?
A little bit.
There we go. Looking pretty good.
breathing rate's pretty good too, yeah.
He's a big boy. Yeah, all right, mate. We won't press the issue, will we? A lot of monster fish keepers almost display their fish in bare bottom, smallish tanks, like a 6 to 8 foot tank. I know that sounds like it's a big tank to many people, but it's not in the sense of a potentially a 2 foot or even a 3 foot fish.
Yeah.
It's not a big tank, and the fish can barely turn around or swim up and down a few things. They can't exhibit any natural behaviours. They can't actually educate any visitors as to what the natural ecosystem's like, because it's just a fish in a glass box. It's like a museum specimen, and I don't get it. Why? Why do you think people do it? Look, it's a very Asian way of displaying fish.
That's what I was going to say. Look, I think a lot of it is from that, you know, the hobby coming over, because the hobby originated in Asia, obviously, you know, when that first popped off and everything. I think a lot of it is...
Goldfish.
Yeah, goldfish, exactly. And I think a lot of that's based off that, you know, leftover thought processes that, you know, you want this pretty fish in a nice glass box.
Do you think it's like a status?
Yeah, I think it's a status thing more so, you know, that you've got this, you know, someone comes in your house and you go, oh, look at this giant fish I've got, you know, a fish that that people want to catch on a rod and reel that you've got in your house in a glass box that you can stare at any point. And I think that's a bit of the, you know, the mentality, that sort of ego thing, that you've got, you know, this big scary fish in a box.
Yeah.
Especially fish like mangrove jack, for instance, like that's a classic, you know, angler's dream. You know, everyone wants to catch it on a rod and reel, and then they have it in your house in this big box. I think that's a lot of the interest for it. It's sort of like an ego thing, or a sense of, you know, you see what other people are doing and you want to replicate it yourself. You know, with those arowana in America, especially Saratoga, a good example. They're related, you know, arowana and stuff like that. So. People in Australia, they get into the fish scene, they go online, they see the arowana, or, you know, the fish that everyone wants in America, and then they look up that they can't get them in Australia, and they sell on the Saratoga, and they stick that toga in a 4 foot tank, and then 6 months later it's up for sale in a local group. And
these guys usually are sold at about 10 centimetres, I guess.
I wouldn't even, like not even that. They're fresh out of the fisheries, fresh out of the hatcheries,
And so they can fit quite comfortably into a 4 foot or a 5 foot or a 6 foot tank, and you can have driftwood and plants and whatnot in there. But just like any predatory fish, they are food when they're little in the wild, and so they actually have to grow fast, and they consume a lot. They want to grow fast so they don't become someone else's food. And so that small fish within a year or 2 years becomes a 30 centimetre long fish, and all of a sudden that 5 foot tank is looking a little bit smaller. And I don't even know the actual potential lifespan of these fish, but it's decades. We're not talking about 5 years. And I would hazard a guess that our fish in our aquariums, these sorts of species, are certainly not living
nowhere near close.
I reckon we should try and get a bit of a brainstorm as what is the best way to display a Queensland Saratoga.
Firstly, I'd look at the environment that they came from and try to do some sort of biotype that's closest to their natural environment.
Yep. Sasha, by the way.
For me, you get to see the fish in its natural environment, what you would see in the wild if you had to actually go out and see it.
Yep.
But also, you have a pretty tank with a beautiful fish to be able to sit and enjoy.
Absolutely. And then when you get visitors, I love having, we get visitors here with their kids, and they love it. They love it because I get to spend time talking about turtles and talking about eels, and they learn about it rather than just seeing a moray eel in a glass box just doing that, which they learn nothing.
So these guys are from up in Queensland, so they're usually found in your northern Queensland waterways. Usually found in your swamps, slow-moving tributaries, rivers, creeks, that sort of thing. They're usually going to be under a lot of plant growth. So a lot of lilies, that's what I'm thinking, sort of a swamp biotype sort of thing. Keeping his tank shallow to begin with, possibly, you know, having some deeper drops-offs and some build-up and stuff where he has to push through. Because naturally, you know, their eyes are situated top of the head, they're surface feeders, they feed on mainly insects and whatnot, so sort of encourage him to show those natural behaviours.
Worried is just going to go
straight at your face, that's what I'm waiting for.
Let's get these guys in.
Here we go.
Oh yeah, he does have a pretty funky eye, doesn't he?
Yeah, a bit of a bum one.
There you go, Pike has some fish water.
Yeah, delicious.
That's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, I didn't think he had any marks on him.
So I'm going to tilt it towards you where the light is.
Yep, beauty.
Go down. Come on, buddy. Okay. There you go. Get this out of the way. So obviously our concern is that these guys leap out of the water. Geez, he's a big size, isn't he?
Compared to the IBC, yeah, well and truly. Like, look at that. That's a solid fish.
In a 5-foot tank. I mean, this is a 4-foot IBC, but this is 4x4.
At least he can turn around, yeah.
Righto, viewers. So this is our Samson the Saratoga. How's that for a name?
I like Samson, yeah, that's a good name.
And I think what we'll do is get him tucked in for the night. Righto, it's the morning after. Nice sunny day. There's plenty of warmth trapped in here last night. We'll see how he's going this morning. Wow, and he's okay. Always a bit of a worry the next morning when you come back out and you think, oh, what's happened overnight, especially with a big fish like this. But he's doing really well. The catfish and the bass are doing fine. Great coloration, look at that. Really nice bronzy colours, beautiful. It's been about 5 days since I've had Samson in my care, and so far he's being a moody fish. He's decided that he doesn't want to eat the food that he was eating in his previous home, which was cichlid gold floating haikari, which I must admit is absolute rubbish. But I picked up this haikari from the pet store just so he could get used to eating in the new environment. Of course, he's decided he does not want to eat any of that. However, I did have some success today. I found 2 large grasshoppers. I did kill them first, chucked them on the surface of the water, and they were snapped up in no time. So he obviously will eat the insects, which he's biologically predisposed to do. But ultimately the plan is to get him back onto eating the food that he actually is used to, and then transfer him across to eating the food that I prefer as a pellet, which is frenzy fish feeds. The only frenzy fish feeds I've got currently are the sinking style, so I need to pick up some floating ones, and then hopefully by mixing the two together we can get him to actually accept the new, better pellet food. I'd love to hear what you guys feel about the ultimate way to care for Samson. I feel very strongly about monster fish, in fact all fish, and the welfare of those fish in captivity, especially with monster fish that have size concerns, that we approach their care very carefully. I do have a background in animal welfare and health. A long time ago I was at uni, and ever since then I've cared particularly about the welfare of fish in captivity because they're often overlooked as being an unintelligent or unfeeling animal, and that's certainly not the case, as any fish keeper does know. I'd love to know what you think about the ultimate size of the aquarium we're going to keep. There is an old rule of thumb back in the day that you should have a tank which is at least 6 times the length of the fish. And you know, on average, if you had a goldfish which is about, I don't know, 20 centimetres, then that would put the fish into a 1.2 or a 4-foot long tank, which, you know, kind of made sense for that in-between style fish. Of course, it made absolutely no sense for a small neon tetra, which would be a tank only that big. Or in this case, this is a 60 centimetre long fish that could potentially grow to 90 centimetres. And at the stage he's at the moment, 6 times his length would be a 3.6 metre or a 12-foot long tank. And he was in a 1.5 metre tank. Clearly we need to approach this build very carefully. Let me know if you'd like to see the bee's knees of bitope style aquariums. Let me know what size, what dimensions. Would we like to have a deeper tank with some darker shady areas, or would you prefer a shallow tank like Pike mentioned with a much more surface area for flooded grasses and lilies? Let me know if you'd like to see me do a tank which I've done previously with epoxy resins, boat coat being my favourite one, or let me know if you'd like to see me try a more budget style build, a bit more in keeping with today's economic climate. Anyway, fingers crossed for Samson. We'll go and get some more grasshoppers, and I'll see you next time on the Australian Aquarist. Over and out.